And welcome aboard, everybody, here to the Open Mic program here on the Sports Talk Nation. And we have a big show for you today, folks. It is so big, it's Big D. It's the Dallas Cowboys, as we're going to preview the Cowboys' 2017 season. A Cowboy team coming off of a 13-3 season last year. They were one of the best teams in the National Football League. Kind of a disappointing way they finished with the loss to Green Bay in the NFC Divisional Playoffs, but the expectations still extraordinarily high for the Cowboys. And, of course, the Cowboys have been in the headlines a lot. A lot of talk about Ezekiel Elliott and his suspension from the National Football League for 6 games. A lot of talk about Dak Prescott and him having this team all to himself now in his second year, and how this team will continue to build upon their success from last year. We have a great guest on the line joining us today to talk about the Cowboys, and that is Sean Martin. He is a host of Upon Further Review on WMSC, which is on the campus of Montclair State. He is on every Friday from 1 to 4 with Tyler Monahan. He is also a Cowboys writer on Inside the Star, so you can check him out there as well. Sean, welcome to the program.
Hey, Mike. Thanks for having me. A lot of excitement, as you mentioned, around this Cowboys team. A lot to talk about, so it's good to be here.
Glad to have you on, man. It's great to have you aboard. And, let's just jump right into this. First of all, I got to ask you about Inside the Star. Tell me more about Inside the Star and your writing for it.
So we are the home of Cowboys Nation, as we like to say. Our official Twitter account is at Cowboys Nation, and that's where, if any Cowboys fans are listening, and if they are on Twitter, they probably are already following along with Cowboys Nation. We have a big following over there that we love to interact with and put our articles out. InsideTheStar.com is, of course, the home, and it's a new site. It's something that has been growing ever since I've been there, which is exciting. My first season was the 2015 season, which was far from fun, to introduce myself to the world of Cowboys blogging, but it's such a great community, and this will be my 3rd season now, so I'm looking forward to getting things going here in 2017 with a team that's on the rise and having another year as a staff writer over there.
Absolutely, man. I'm really proud of you for doing that, and congratulations again on getting now into your 3rd year of writing about the Cowboys. I mean, this is a team, you just hit upon it, has a lot of high expectations this year. The biggest story coming into this into this season as we end training camp is Ezekiel Elliott. And the big story today coming out of the NFL is that his suspension appeal hearing has concluded after 3 days and 25 hours, to be exact. And now it is up to Harold Henderson to come down with a decision whether he is going to uphold the suspension of 6 games or decide to cut down that suspension a few games. And, stop me where we've heard this before, where we've heard a situation where the NFL suspends a player for a number of games when the evidence is quite scant. I've heard the story right before, but that's the case here with Ezekiel Elliott. And as we all know, with the domestic abuse charges, there were no charges actually filed. It's just all claims, for that matter. He was never arrested, never served any jail time for this. So the suspension, I think, caught a lot of people off guard. I want to know from you, and you've been covering this a lot on Inside the Star, what are your thoughts right now about this suspension here with Elliott?
Yeah, man, let's just start with the question I've gotten a lot through this whole thing, and hasn't slowed down. It's really basic, as you alluded to. How could we even be at this point, like we're talking about an Ezekiel Elliott suspension, a 6-game suspension that still holds, as of today? How did we even get to this point? And sort of the mess that got us here aside, how did we get to the point where now he's appealing, and a decision is going to have to come from Henderson very soon? It's almost like a second phase to this to talk about, because there has been new evidence that he's apparently brought to these hearings, which is a good sign for his case, because that's what we all believed he would need to do if this was going to have a chance to be reduced. It's pretty simple, though. How could this happen? Well, you look at Article 46 of the collective bargaining agreement, which gives Roger Goodell all the power in the world and the NFL all the power to do something just like this for any reason. And then the letter that they sent Ezekiel Elliott to actually suspend him is public. You can go read it. It's out there. And, in there they outline different things he did to warrant this discipline, whether it's warranting 6 games or not is what we're appealing right now. But conduct detrimental to the league is the phrase that we keep coming back to. So it's not, the buzzword, if you will, that goes around the NFL right now of the domestic violence. It's not one thing or another. It's kind of a culmination of, you've done sort of enough to warrant some punishment, and here's 6 games because, well, that's the number we decided, and that's the number that might get reduced here, might go away entirely, or might hold up very shortly. We should find that out.
What's so odd is that we really don't know what really happened, and all the accusations against Elliott, whether they are true or not, again, have not been proven. And again, he hasn't even been arrested for this, which makes this whole episode very, very odd. I compare it to the Deflategate because that's the most recent example of this kind of power flex by Roger Goodell in the NFL that we have. At least with that, we all kind of saw what was going on, obviously, with the deflated footballs. We knew about it. We knew about the Colts complaining about it. Certainly a different kind of level than, obviously, domestic violence, but it just strikes me that the NFL has been so inconsistent when it comes to levying punishments on its players for all these kind of violations, whether it be something as ticky-tack as the Deflategate case with Brady, or whether it be some of the other situations where we saw Ray Rice only get 2 games for the domestic violence against his wife, where we had video of him hitting his wife in an elevator, or even reports about the Giants kicker last year, who numerous reports that he had abused his wife over many, many years, and even the Giants knew about it, and he only got 1 game. It really bothers me that the NFL is so inconsistent when it comes to these kinds of decisions.
And it absolutely should, because there's no precedent for these suspensions, even when they tried to set their own guidelines, and then they broke them here with one of their highest profile players. I don't really care that, he was a rookie or now he's a second-year guy. He's still one of the biggest names in the sport because of the way he, came onto the scene. He was a big name even at Ohio State. People that didn't even follow college football knew what Zeke Elliott did when he carried those Buckeyes to a national championship and then got drafted with the 4th pick, to come be a Dallas Cowboy and run behind this great offensive line, and sure enough, lead the league in rushing before this offseason now. And the standard for suspension for the domestic violence, which again this isn't exactly 4, so it's not a perfect comparison to Elliott or any case really with what he's gone through, would be the 4 games. So he got 2 more than that, and he's expecting it to go down. So is Howard Henderson going to reduce this to 4? Is he going to reduce it to 0? And most importantly, above all, is, and no one's going to want to hear this, but this still isn't going to go away, because Ezekiel Elliott is still probably going to take this case to court, unless it goes all the way down to a 0-game suspension or no suspension, which doesn't seem likely at all. It would be reduced to maybe 2 for something more manageable, but that's still not going to be the final step towards what's been just a frustrating process for Cowboys fans, for Ezekiel Elliott, for Jerry Jones, and just NFL fans trying to get some transparency on how the league operates in terms of managing their players, managing discipline, and getting the most out of things.
Yeah, absolutely. It's really just a huge problem for the NFL. And, this is one reason why a lot of fans have had their issues with the league, have had issues with Roger Goodell, because of this lack of transparency, because of this inconsistency when it comes to levying any kind of discipline on his players, whether it be warranted or not. And it's a big problem for him. And now there's, of course, to go back to the Brady thing, there is precedent where a player does take it all the way up the court system against the NFL, and I don't think the NFL wants to go through that again. But it looks like we're going to have to go through that.
There's a reason that this appeal process for Ezekiel Elliott has gone as long as it has, and it's because right at the outset of it, he went and hired a man that the NFL is pretty openly scared of, and you can read some great columns from some other guys out here about this, and I've certainly been doing that, and we've been trying to share him around and all that. And Jeffrey Kessler is the lawyer that Ezekiel Elliott has added to his already, of course, strong legal team. He has, Jerry Jones' support, who's one of the most powerful, if not the most powerful owner going in the league right now, which is an owners-driven league under Roger Goodell. So the NFL wants this appeal process, I firmly believe this at least, to be the end of this. But unless it goes from a 6-game suspension down to no suspension, I don't think it's going to be the end of it. With 3 days of appeal hearings, it certainly seems that they've had long enough to talk for enough evidence to come up to hear enough of Ezekiel Elliott's side to maybe warrant taking the suspension away entirely. But you have to remember, this is a 13-month investigation that even got us to the point where the initial discipline was handed down. To reverse all of this in 3 days of hearings and testimony that's already been done, although Elliott was able to crucially introduce some new evidence these past couple of days, I've heard, and have Henderson get Russ to a decision, which was today's report that they want to get this done so Elliott's week 1 status can be decided. It's really going to be up in the air in terms of what we expect in these coming days, but we should find out something. And as I said a few times, we should expect anything less than a complete reversal of the suspension to lead to Elliott taking this to court.
What's your prediction? How do you think Henderson's going to rule? I mean, just based on precedent from what I've read and from what we've seen over the years, I'm gonna guess that he's probably going to cut it down to at least 3. But I could see it being cut in half. What about yourself?
Yeah, I think 3 is a good number. I think 4 is a good estimate as well. It's so hard to say. I think I would probably not confidently at all place a bet on this going down to 4 games. I think that Howard Henderson, you have to remember, he heard, of course, Cowboys defensive end Greg Hardy's appeal back in 2015, a case that was much more volatile and surrounding a player that did nothing to help himself throughout the entire process, and then only stuck on the Cowboys roster for 1 year, hasn't had a job in the NFL since, and I believe that was warranted, and that we'll never see him in this league again. Nonetheless, Elliott still has a long career ahead of him, we assume. I think that some discipline is warranted. I think you can find plenty of Cowboys fans, myself included, that when this whole investigation began, were saying that some discipline is warranted because we were scared, quite frankly, for the future of this franchise running back that's almost too good to be true running behind this offensive line. We were scared for not having him long term. Sit him down for 2 games to start the season, something like that. Let's get his head straight, get his legs rested, and he'll be a long-term benefit of that, and we'll have him for the next 10 years as we expect. 6 games was harsh, though. You expected to get cut in half. I would say 4, and I still, no matter what, 3, 4, 5, or 2 expect court, as I've said. I'm not expecting at all a full reversal of this, and I'd also expect it. Well, I also wouldn't be surprised, I should say, if it remains at 6 games with the pressure that Howard Henderson has on him.
Not to mention, he's had Elliott. That is, has had his issues in the past. I mean, other than just the charges that have been levied here with the suspension, we had the incident with the at the St. Patrick's Day parade, nightclub allegation where he broke a man's nose. So all these things have been out there. So yeah, if you're a Cowboys fan, or even a fantasy owner for that matter, with Ezekiel Elliott, you'd like to see him get this thing cleaned up and so get his act cleaned up, and maybe this will be a lesson to him. Now, as far as this affecting the play of the team, when I look at the suspension and I look at how it's going to affect the Cowboys, it will have some effect. I know Darren McFadden is a very solid back, and he's not what he was, let's say, in his prime of his career when he was at the Oakland Raiders. But he is a serviceable back. But still, to lose a guy who was the leading rusher of this team, set a franchise record for rushing yards by a rookie, it's going to have an impact, even whether it's be 2 games, 3 games, 6 games, whatever it's going to be. There'll be some impact without Ezekiel Elliott behind Dak Prescott at the start of the season.
Oh, absolutely. There's not a running back on this roster that does what Ezekiel Elliott can do pre-snap or during the play, on any given play for the Cowboys. He wasn't drafted just for his running ability, although, he is a running back. He needs to be able to run the ball, and I think he does that better than anybody else, and a lot of fans agree. But he can block, he can catch the ball as well. He is the definition of a complete player at that position that just flat out helps any team win games, and especially the Cowboys because of how well they're built to play to not the running game strengths, but play specifically to a player like Ezekiel Elliott's strength. So you're going to see, Darren McFadden, Alfred Morris, Rod Smith, and these guys try their best to fill that role, and it's going to be a team effort at the running back position to do just that. But there's nobody on this team that, you stick the ball in their chest like Dak Prescott was able to do to Zeke Elliott, and he's hitting on big plays. I noted this when I put together my notebook post that I do each week after games when the Cowboys are coming off to win against the Raiders. Elliott got his only preseason work. So it was the only time this preseason where we've been able to evaluate the running back depth chart all the way from top to bottom. Every other game has been started by McFadden and Morris, and then we've worked down and had plenty of good things to say still. The running game has been strong this preseason. There's no doubt about that. This is the only time we've gotten to see Elliott and then those next guys. And Elliott, he didn't look rusty. He didn't hit on any huge runs. He just looked like himself, and they managed him carefully, and they got him out of there after a drive. You could still see that extra burst around the corner, the balance that he takes hitting the hole to get some elusiveness going through the hole, those 10-yard runs that turn into 15-yard runs, falling forward, carrying defenders with him. You just don't have a guy like this without him if you're the Cowboys. You can hand the ball to McFadden and still keep your scheme integrity. He's not going to be a guy you have to change your blocking scheme for. You can still run your split zones and all that with McFadden. You can pound the ball with Morris, and they really like Rod Smith, as I said. But that's three names that are trying to each do a little bit something different, and they're not all going to be on the field at the same time to replace one player that can carry such a big workload. Your bell cow and Ezekiel Elliott is a big loss.
It is, and especially going into the first game, in the first couple of weeks of the season, you got the Giants front seven. Giants have one of the best defenses in the National Football League, and then you go up against the Denver Broncos, who are 2 years removed from being the league's number one defense. So to start the season, you go right into the frying pan, if you will, right away, and then you got Arizona after that. So it's not going to be easy to start the season. That's for sure, as far as the schedule is concerned, and that's when you talk about pressure, you talk about expectations. We talk about the quarterback, obviously, with Dak Prescott. No Tony Romo to look over his shoulder now. This is his team. And the question is going to be for everybody throughout the course of this year, and I think he can handle it. And in my mind, I think he can. But a lot of people are going to say, well, is there going to be a sophomore slump? Is he going to have a drop back? Yeah, I mean, maybe he'll have a little bit of a drop back. I mean, he only threw 4 picks last year. I think he was going to throw a few more. But I think this is just the continuing development of a 24-year-old player who is going to be, most likely, the face of this franchise for a very long time. And I think a moment like this is a great opportunity for him to really show that leadership skills that they're going to have to rely upon in a few years.
Yeah, the arrow's going nowhere but up for Dak Prescott. I had a really interesting conversation about this with a fan on Twitter recently. A couple of nights ago, we were talking about how a lot of fans around the league that were obviously talking about Dak as he was a big story every week. A lot of fans that weren't Cowboys fans that talked about Dak didn't really understand the type of pressure that Cowboys fans are putting on him based on how spoiled we were in past years by Tony Romo. And, it probably wasn't fair, and I can't say, at least from my standpoint, that I was putting a ton of pressure on the kid, but I certainly saw some of that. And, secondhand, you want to win games, so he was our starting quarterback. You still want to go out there and compete. We've seen too many lost seasons to the backup quarterback, but it got down to the point, and I was talking about this with the fan, if Dak Prescott missed a throw but got away with it, and the throw wasn't exactly where it needed to be, there was absolutely no, even as early as week 1 or week 2 where he got us supposed to win against the Redskins, there was no, oh, you got lucky, kid, keep trying to improve, keep getting better. It was, you got lucky, kid, that can't happen again. And this was a 4th-round pick that was getting no training camp reps until Kellen Moore went down. Jamil Sowers was the better quarterback, if you ask any of the Dallas media who covered the camp at Oxnard. So this was a no-name that was going to be a long-term, developmental, sit-behind-Romo for a few years guy that came in, had all the pressure in the world on him, and just continued to get better and better and better. Every single week there were improvements. I mentioned that Washington game, week 2, his first win. You go back, watch the tape of that game. It was such a dumbed-down offense, if you will, that Scott Linehan had him running. It was so many stop routes. It was such simple plays that he had him running. And then by week 16 or much earlier than that, he's moving guys at the line of scrimmage, hitting guys in stride. The playbook opened up for a quarterback that a lot of Cowboys fans have wanted to see a similar style to for a while. There were a considerable percentage of fans that wanted us to move on from Romo because of the injuries years ago and get a mobile, athletic type guy to maximize the careers of Des Bryant and the offensive line, all that. Well, that guy has arrived, and he's year 2 Dak Prescott, where there'll be no sophomore slump, in my opinion.
I mean, the one game that comes to mind for me when I think about last year with Dak Prescott that really put him on the national stage was the game against Green Bay. Going into Lambeau Field against the Packers, they had just won 4 straight games early in the year last year, and you can make the argument that going up against Washington, Chicago, San Francisco, these were kind of the underbelly of the league. So a lot of people are saying, okay, well, show something here against Green Bay, and he did. He played great that day, threw 3 touchdowns, completed 2/3 of his passes. Dallas was blowing the game away going into the half, so it was just a pure dominant effort by the Dallas Cowboys that night. And I thought that was the game that really put this Dallas team on the map, and also Dak Prescott, at least from the national standpoint.
You could say that there were probably 3 games in the Cowboys' 2016 schedule where if Dak Prescott did do what he did by winning them and playing well at the same time, you could have entertained a switch back to Romo. And these are, of course, all after Romo was either ready or about to be ready. And it's that Steelers game where he went blow for blow with them, and it was an NFL classic and a game down to the wire that you won on him, taking the ball down the field and Elliott scoring the winning touchdown. The Ravens game, which was right after Romo gave that press conference and, handed him the starting job, and he wasn't amazing, but Dak still just found a way to get you a nice win at home. And then the Eagles game that went into overtime, where this team was down in the dumps. It was Sunday Night Football, and it looked like we were about to take another loss. And, another loss could have helped this team at that point in the season. It wouldn't have been the end of the world, but sure enough, you go overtime, and first drive, Dak throws a game-winning touchdown to Jason Witten. Those were the opportunities that he never gave away, and, it was such a media frenzy of everyone wanted to write Dak Prescott stories. Everybody wanted to say that they interviewed him in high school or at Mississippi State, whatever. And I think it's the Mississippi State stories that stand out the most when he talks about and his coaches talk about just how every opportunity they ever gave him there, he always stepped on it completely and never looked back. And he's not looking back now, certainly, as the starter for the Dallas Cowboys.
It helps when you have a quarterback who's good, a young quarterback who's good, but also when you have a lot of good talent around him. I mean, obviously the weapons offensively have been tremendous. When you have veteran guys like Des Bryant and Jason Witten, that makes things a lot easier for you. But this offensive line, it's been talked about ad nauseum for years now about how good this group is. I mean, when you have guys like Travis Frederick, Zach Martin, these are guys that have been stalwarts on this offensive line for a number of years. This is a good group. I mean, this is a group that the expectation is going to be if the Cowboys are going to get back atop of this division and maybe even make a move in the playoffs, this unit, this offensive line is going to play a big role in doing that, because all these veteran pieces, I think, play a big role in taking a lot of pressure off this young quarterback.
You're right, and the Cowboys' offensive line is their engine to this thing. What's crazy is just look at what Romo said about this team last year himself. He said what hurt him the most was he felt that this was going to be the best team he ever got to play on, and Jerry Jones kind of half-heartedly backed that up by saying everything that they did to build this team to where it was, and the way they built it, strategically, was for Romo, and it turned into being for Dak, and you can see how well it is built for Dak. He makes everyone around him better, but the players around him make him better at the same time, and it's really just a perfect situation for this team to, hit on a window here, if you will, with these young players all coming together with the right veterans still in place to lead them, and they're only going to keep getting better and better.
I keep harping on this with drafts. I understand that when it gets to draft time, you want to always take the best player available. And a lot of teams want to get the quarterback. They want to get the star running back in the first round. But I was like, well, if you're not sure, or if you have a team that's kind of on the cusp of being pretty good, being like a 9-7, 10-6 kind of team, or not, just draft offensive line help in your first round. And that's what Dallas did over the years. I mean, you go up and down this line, 4 of the 5 guys are all first-round picks. By Dallas. That's just tremendous what they've been able to do in the first round. And that's how you build a football team. And I look at some of these other teams in the National Football League, and I see them, okay, we'll take a safety this year, or we'll take a defensive player this year. That's nice, but it's all about building your offensive line. I just wish more teams would just focus on that early in these drafts.
Jason Garrett was asked this year at some point, I don't remember which week, pretty bluntly doing a press conference during the week, doing a practice or whatever. He was asked this year, why don't more teams do what you've done and, just go first-round pick, build a great wall, if you will, and have the stellar offensive line that can help you win games. And Jason Garrett's not always a man of few words or many words, but he will elaborate sometimes, but this is a simple answer, as simple as I've heard him say. He just smiled and laughed a little bit and said, I really don't know, because the Cowboys are obviously enjoying their offensive line. They can't speak for anybody else, and you're absolutely right. It is just such a great weapon to have, because all these guys are so young. They work well together. They practice well together. They're such a tight-knit group on and off the field, and those 5 guys are a big piece of their success, even to the point when guys have had to rotate in and out. This year, you could have a new left guard, a new right tackle. Things are still swinging around. This is definitely the most uncertain that this offensive line has been since, you talk about the run of first-round picks began with left tackle Tyron Smith. But nonetheless, I don't see anybody losing sleep over their ability to perform this year and protect Dak Prescott and pave the way for, if not Ezekiel Elliott for 16 games, Darren McFadden, Rod Smith, Alfred Morris, and just to not miss a beat.
Before we move over to the draft picks, on obviously the other side of the ball, where a lot of those draft picks were acquired in the draft this April, I'm looking at the receiving core. And, the Cowboys didn't have a single 1,000-yard receiver last year. Cole Beasley led the team in receiving. Yet it felt like they had two or three 1,000-yard receivers last year. Stats are stats. I mean, they are what they are. They look good on the bubblegum card. But who do you see kind of having that breakout year that maybe even makes even last year's stats even better than what they put up a year ago?
I think if you want a breakout candidate from the wide receivers for the Cowboys this year, it has to be second-year guy Bryce Butler. Because, Dez Bryant is established. You know what a healthy Dez Bryant is going to do. And you could argue for hours probably how much of a healthy Dez Bryant we've seen, over these past couple of years. But this year he's fully healthy. He's had a full offseason. So a healthy Dez Bryant is going to do big things one way or another. We understand this at this point in his career. Cole Beasley, many believe, is the best slot receiver in the NFL. I'll certainly agree with them on that. You already mentioned he led this team in receiving. They have, rookie Ryan Switzer that they're excited about, and they're trying to work him back from an injury right now. You have Terrence Williams, who signed a very team-friendly contract to come back and keep that offensive continuity all together. And, then you have Bryce Butler, who was brought in here when Dez Bryant was hurt a year ago or 2 years ago. And he's a guy that has never really hit on things in his career. He was touted as this vertical threat that was going to be a big play, splash down the field receiver. But he couldn't really get that element of his game going. It's more of an underneath type thing. A lot of fans that were upset with Terrence Williams over this past seasons have wanted Butler to take his job. You just don't realize how much, how hard it is for a guy that came in under the circumstances that Bryce Butler did to take a player like Terrence Williams who was drafted here his job. So that was a bit, unrealistic from some fans just based on not understanding how these coaches think. But Terrence Williams is still going to be this team's wide receiver too. That said, I think that there are more snaps available for Bryce Butler this year. I think all of these guys are going to get their opportunities. And, if you can't, let's say, run the ball with as much success these first 6 weeks or however long you're going to have to be playing with Elliott, can you manufacture some different things and get Bryce Butler in the slot going down the field or use him on that jet sweep role? Can you find ways to get Bryce Butler more involved in this offense? I certainly think you can, and I certainly think he's ready to take on more of a role based on his performances through training camp and the preseason.
Very interesting. I mean, again, this is a team that has enough weapons as it is with regards to guys like Dez Bryant and, of course, Cole Beasley. Cole Beasley, I agree with you. Right now, he was probably the best slot receiver in the league when you consider Julian Edelman now out for New England. So I think a lot of people are going to look at Cole Beasley, at least from the fantasy standpoint, being that guy that they're going to look at. But let's take a look at this draft from this year. And the Cowboys are very focused on defense, and you can certainly understand why. They have enough offensively they can look to the other side of the ball. They pick up Taco Charlton from Michigan, the defensive end, with their first pick. In the first round. They then add a couple of corners as well, including Jordan Lewis out of Michigan as well in the third round. So a strong focus, Xavier Woods, safety in the sixth round, a strong focus on defense, especially in the secondary, getting a little more pressure up front and also trying to create some havoc in the secondary as well. So your thoughts on what this defense is looking like as far as these new kids on the block are shaping up to be?
Well, absolutely, and I'd like to base this answer on more of what I want to be able to tell you about what I've seen from these young DBs that they're going to have to count on so much because all the guys that left at those positions in free agency. But the truth of the matter is, it is what it is at that position right now because so many of these guys have unfortunately missed so much time, and now we're getting reports that they're just trying to be cautious and have them ready for week one. It's really hard to believe some of that when these are rookie players that you're going to have to count on. You'd like to see in practice, but yeah, they're going to throw a lot of these guys into the fire. Taco Charlton, I think they have the pieces to hide a little bit. He's not going to come help this pass rush all that much, which has been obviously a huge sore spot for this team for too long now, but he is going to come in and just get better each week is the hope for him, be a rotational guy at first, play that left defensive end position, which means play to run well, which all these guys have to do across this defensive line. Flash a little bit as a pass rusher and, show some improvements in that patented Rod Marinelli rotation. But, yeah, I mean, it's really hard to talk about these secondary guys because they haven't been out there. But Chidobe Awuzie is a guy that they're really high on. He fits the scheme. He can play corner or safety. Jordan Lewis is going to be your slot guy. But thankfully, you've had Orlando Scandrick have a bit of a resurrection, if you will, and really playing with a ton of confidence at that position. Xavier Woods is a guy that is healthy here and is going to play a little bit. And, as a 6th-round pick, a lot of people had him on their draft board, mine included, higher than that. And he's a guy that could challenge for another starting job. That'd be 2 years in a row where the Cowboys hit on a starting defensive back in the 6th round. Anthony Brown going to be a big piece at cornerback this year. And then Xavier Woods, a hard-hitting safety to play next to Byron Jones. So they like to rotate these guys in the secondary as well. The term starter has been a relative thing in Dallas here. But, these first couple of weeks, it's going to be interesting managing the expectations for a bunch of rookies that, we know they can play based on college tape. We know that they're different from the guys that departed in that the thinking with the Dallas secondary now is they want more guys to make more plays on the ball, less of the Brandon Carr and the Morris Claiborne types that, were just solid but not making those plays on the ball. Now, are they going to be making those plays without the practice time that they've missed? And when it's the Giants coming in here in just a couple of days, it feels like, and, the Broncos after that, and away we go with these kids being thrown in the fire. It'll undoubtedly be exciting. It could be a bit nervous at times as well, but these guys are simply going to have to be ready. That's the reality for, a team that was 13-3 last year because of their rookies. They don't have a lot of rookies to turn to right now and say, he's really going to help us.
In looking at last year's draft class, obviously excluding Dak and Ezekiel Elliott on the offensive side of the ball, Malik Collins, he did contribute some sacks last year, had 5 sacks last season. Cowboys hoping that he could probably take the next step this year in year number 2. Then you have Charles Tapper, who didn't contribute much last season, and then you have Jalen Smith, the outside linebacker, who was the second pick they took last year. So some of these guys on the defensive end last year, maybe they didn't put up the gaudy numbers to kind of stand out, but coming into their second years, there'll be some expectations for those guys to kind of take it to another level this year.
Yeah, I like the one name you brought up there. Malik Collins is in for what many believe to be a huge season. I know Brian Broaddus is a very respected Cowboys writer from the team website, a former scout with the team, and a Super Bowl winning scout with the Green Bay Packers. Was on record saying that Malik Collins makes his first Pro Bowl this season, and I could say it because that free technique defensive tackle position is the most important spot in Rod Marinelli's scheme. He wants a guy there that's going to get up the field, make a lot of plays. They free him up in that scheme to make plays. And Malik Collins came from a similar scheme out of college in Nebraska. And, and he was another guy last year that expectations for his rookie season had to be tamed down because he broke his foot early in the offseason program. And so we were all saying, a 3rd-round defensive tackle with no practice, how much is he going to help? I guess we won't get to see anything from Malik Collins. Sure enough, he came in here and was just blowing plays up from that free tech position, and he played well enough to actually let you move Tyrone Crawford out to the left defensive end position, the guy that wasn't performing at the free tech as you wanted him to, as you paid him to. His contract is still a burden on his defensive line, but you needed him at the left defensive end spot. Tyrone Crawford still get a play out there because of the efforts that Malik Collins gives you at the free tech, and now he's had that offseason, and he's been giving Zach Martin some problems throughout training camp, which is obviously great to see because nobody's worried about Zach Martin actually executing in a game, but the fact that the second-year defensive tackle Malik Collins can give him some trouble in camp says a whole lot, and I can't wait to see what he does this year on the defensive line.
Yeah, I mean, second year, that's a big guy, 22 years old, right there in the middle of this defense here for the Dallas Cowboys. He's going to be a guy that's going to get into a lot of backfields. You can see it. Not to mention, just to create that to add to the pressure with that, you have guys coming off the edge. Obviously, Sean Lee, one of the Pro Bowler, coming off the edge. You have Hitchens there in the middle. So, linebacker core, I think, pretty solid for Dallas. And then you go into the secondary with Orlando Scandrick leading the way for this secondary. I know Hitchens is listed on the injury list right now, but Scandrick, of course, in the secondary, one of the top corners in the league. Always a guy to always come off on the blitz as well. So, defensively, while Dallas's defense may not get all the headlines that this offense does, it's still a very solid unit that's going to contribute some big plays this year.
It is, and I think that the best thing you can say about this Cowboys defense is that they'll always, at least the hope is, be able to do enough to support the offense, in that this is a scheme built around, playing with the lead. And you could say, oh, well, any defense wants to go out there and play with the lead. And that's true. You want to be winning football games. That's football 101. But there are defenses out there with the playmakers to get the ball back and to even, score points for yourself and all that. This isn't going to be that type of defense, but it is going to be a defense that forces you to throw the ball in front of them, and they're going to come downhill at you and make a bunch of tackles and force you to methodically move the ball down the field against you. Is that enough to beat a Cowboys team that has quick strike ability with Prescott, throwing the ball around the yard, or they can grind out those long drives with the running game? It's just complementary football from top to bottom is what the Cowboys are hoping to build. If not this year, it's really come to tuition next year when you get another year of all these secondary guys. But for now, this new look secondary is built around getting their hands on more passes, being more aggressive, but most importantly, just being able to keep plays in front of them and not give up big plays. Big plays will lose you football games if you're giving them up, and the Cowboys expect offensively to hit on them. Defensively, they expect and they'll get this game plan to not give up a lot of them, no matter who's out there.
That kind of leads me, before we talk about this division and talk about the game against the Giants coming up in a couple, about 10 days, one thing I think that Dallas is going to want to try to do this year, I'm sure the coaches agree with this, is they're going to want to try to force more turnovers. They only had 6 picks last year and forced a total of 9 turnovers. They want to get their hands on the ball. You hit it on it just a little while ago. They want to get their hands on the ball and force some turnovers here, and really put themselves in positions where they can change games really late in games. They played a lot of close games last year. You mentioned the overtime game against Philadelphia, the classic game in Pittsburgh in November last year. A lot of close games. If they're going to want to close games out early in the fourth quarter, forcing these turnovers is going to be huge for them.
Yeah, that's very well said. That was, they came into this draft knowing the players they moved on from in the secondary, and they flat out said, before the draft, Stephen Jones and the likes of this front office said, yeah, we like the players that we could possibly be picking here more than those guys. They weren't doing it for us anymore. We think that there's some playmakers and some guys that can get their hands on the ball in this draft, so they fall to us and all that. And you were able to come away with Chidobe Awuzie, Jordan Lewis, Xavier Woods. You put on the tape of those 3 guys, and sure enough, they're around the ball. They do make plays. So all 3 of them going to transition into here seamlessly. Well, we already talked about the injuries and the fact that it's a big uphill battle at this point for him. But at some point, that's the hope for this secondary, to not only just be, the bend but don't break pieces back there on this Dallas defense, but to be legitimate guys to help you win games by breaking up passes, intercepting passes, and creating turnovers.
Absolutely. Again, we're talking with Sean Martin of WMSC. He has a show called Upon Further Review, heard on Fridays, 1 to 4 p.m. with Taylor Monahan, and of course he writes for Inside the Star. Sean, let's take a look at the schedule, look at the division here. Obviously, they play the Giants right away to start the season. This is the game. It seems like it's the annual Cowboys-Giants season opener. At least that's the case now. 5 of the last 6 years, they've opened up against one another.
Yeah, it's gotten tiring.
A little bit. I mean, can we have an opener where the Cowboys play, I don't know, San Francisco or something like that? I mean, it would be somebody else. But the division is going to be interesting because a lot of people love the Giants. A lot of people love the fact that they've added, of course, Brandon Marshall to this receiving core. They're dynamic from that standpoint. You have Odell Beckham Jr. When he's not on the boat going to Miami, and and as well as Brandon Marshall, you have Sterling Shepard in there as well. Eli, of course, always steady, and this defense, which was so good last year. A lot of people think the Giants can challenge Dallas for the division title. You have Philadelphia with that young up-and-coming quarterback there in Carson Wentz, and then you have the Redskins, who are just such a bizarre story. What else is new with Redskins? Such a bizarre story. I mean, if Kirk Cousins has the year of his life, he's going to make a boatload of money in the offseason, that's for sure. So all these different storylines and a division that, of course, is going to be very, very tight all the way through. First on this game against the Giants, what are your thoughts on Big Blue as they go into this opener?
Yeah, I think you said some good things about this Giants team, and that I expect them to be again the closest competitor to the Cowboys in this 2017 NFC East race. It's always such a fun division. It's so fun to talk about this NFC East because of all the storylines that that you've gotten to there. And, the Giants, they certainly have flaws that people haven't talked about as much because of what they added and, the exciting pieces. People love, for fantasy reasons and some other reasons as well when you add, wide receivers and you draft wide receivers in the first round and all that. But especially when you have an offensive-minded coach and Ben McAdoo. But, I still see, I wouldn't say holes on the defense that played so well, but there are concerns on both sides of the ball for the Giants. There's the offensive line, which always inhibits them. And so, it's not a perfect team, but to call this Cowboys team perfect would obviously be far from true right now as well. So, I do expect the Giants to be, again, the closest competitor to the Cowboys. We're going to see it in just 10 days here. A Giants team that's going to come in and expect to be able to slow the Cowboys running game, Ezekiel Elliott out there or not. And, it's going to be up to Dak Prescott or Eli Manning to go win the game here. And across the way in the Giants secondary, I know for sure there's going to be plenty of names that we recognize and guys that got to Dak last year. For the Cowboys, it's going to be a bunch of guys that I've never seen a guy like Eli Manning out there quite yet. So that's going to be a big storyline. And, I expect the Giants to play pretty well here in Week 1. Win the game, I'm not sure, but I expect them to play pretty well, and that will set the tone for the division.
Yeah, I could certainly see a shootout on Sunday night. I really could. It's a typical 35-31 kind of game between these two teams. Would not surprise me. The one thing that concerns me with the Giants is a couple of things. One, you mentioned it with the offensive line. It's been so in flux for so many years. Pugh's their best player. He's now a guard. They still have Brandon Flowers there, which still or Eric Flowers, just still blows my mind how this guy still has a job in the National Football League. I mean, he was so awful. Well. He was so awful at left tackle last year. I just don't get it. Or even why they didn't try to move him to guard or on the right side of the line. The running game is still pretty non-existent. I mean, I really don't have a lot of faith in guys like Paul Perkins or Shane Vereen. I know Vereen's coming off the injury. So that's going to be a problem for them. And it's also about combustibility. And, even though as talented as Odell and as talented as Brandon Marshall are, both of those guys are known for being combustible players. And, attitudes, opinions can sometimes get heated in a locker room. What happens when things get tough with those two guys around? That'll be something to watch as well with the Giants. So I think they'll be good. I agree with you. I think they'll be a good team, but there's just a few things that do bother me with the Giants coming into this season.
And there always should be. If any team is sitting back right now here with the last week of the preseason upon us and some practices before Week 1, is all that's left between kickoff. If any team is sitting back saying, yeah, we're fine, let's cancel our last preseason game and go, then they're in a spot where they're probably not looking to contend this season. I think the Giants, and I think the moves back this up, of course, and you can hear it from them as well, their coaches and all that, all the team that want to go win, one more time here, at least try to, with Eli Manning as their quarterback. And he's a guy as well that I think helps mitigate the problem you're talking to there a little bit with keeping guys together and all that. He's going to manage his offense, and they'll go as far as he can take him on that side of the ball, which, just based on what he has around him, should be relatively far.
Philadelphia, Washington, they're going to meet each other in Week 1 as well. I think that's huge. That's a big game as well in the NFC East to see those two teams go at it. Whoever wins that game gets an early jump on being that team that could potentially surprise in the division. If I had to pick between one of the two of them, I would say probably Philadelphia more likely to surprise. Washington's been around. They won the division a couple of years ago, so we know what they can do. Philadelphia is kind of that team that is unknown. I love the addition of LeGarrette Blount in the backfield for them. This guy was a downhill runner with the Patriots, blowing people up in the secondary into the second level. You add him to this offense. You have Alshon Jeffrey now as well on a make-or-break contract. Philadelphia could be a team that could be very intriguing to watch, and also went like Dak Prescott into his second year as a quarterback.
Yeah, the key word there being could, because I haven't seen the quarterback in year 2 be kind of propped up on less than I have with Carson Wentz. And I like the kid. I really do. I liked him out of college, and I think he's shown a lot. But everywhere I turn, it's people saying, oh, this has to be the year for Wentz. This has to be the year for the Eagles. He's got to show so much more. They have to do this, that, and the other thing. This is a team that, they can't be looking in the rearview mirror at what the Cowboys did and how well things went for Dak Prescott. Dak Prescott was a special case. He had a lot around him, and he just had a lot of skill to come fit this offense and take things in stride. Carson Wentz obviously isn't that type of guy. He's shown that with just his talent and his tape that he's put out there through 1 year, and he didn't have those weapons. Now he has, yes, a new cast of weapons, and it's an improved cast of weapons. Alshon Jeffrey, LeGarrette Blount, and all that, Torrey Smith, but it's still a whole new offense, whole new offensive personnel for him to go deal with. So this really shouldn't be looked at, in my view, Mike, as a go out and win type year for the Eagles. Just continue to evaluate your young quarterback, and hey, if you win some games, if he wins you some games, which is ultimately what you want to see, then that's going to be great because you have the defense to take you there as well. And if he can just complement that and these receivers can help him out, then yeah, this team could do something. But I think there's kind of lofty expectations coming from just about nowhere for this Eagles team that's going to have an uphill battle, I think, contending with the Giants and the Cowboys.
Yeah, and they too also, like the Cowboys, went defense with their picks, taking Derek Barnett out of Tennessee with their first pick, and then taking Sidney Jones and Russell Douglas, both cornerbacks out of Washington and West Virginia, respectively. So, Eagles, a team that will be a team to watch, a team that is going to be a watch, and they're trying to evaluate and see where they are going into year two of this Carson Wentz, Doug Peterson era for Philadelphia. Let's hit this up before we close this podcast out here on the Open Mic program on Sports Talk Nation. What are your keys? What's about the keys to success for the Dallas Cowboys this year? What has to happen? What you think could happen this year? I'll start this off. I think keys for Dallas, one is obviously health. They have to stay healthy, have to keep Dak Prescott healthy throughout the course of this year. Got to force more turnovers, as we talked about just a little while ago. Continue to get more pressure on the quarterback, on the defensive end, and try to end some games, win some games with that defense. You don't want to put it all on just the shoulders of this young second-year quarterback for the second straight season. And, of course, what will be the impact of the Ezekiel Elliott suspension? Can they, for the first 3 weeks, which are going to be really tough, 3 tough games, can they ride the storm for 3 weeks and come out of that 2-1? If they come out of it 2-1, watch out for the Dallas Cowboys this year.
Yeah, Cowboys Nation won't want to hear you say that the team is in trouble without Dak Prescott because of all the mania that's surrounded undrafted quarterback Cooper Rush. But to not kid myself, yes, they need Dak Prescott out there, and that's well said. And he is certainly a key to this season because he's an up-and-coming quarterback that everyone's expecting, myself included, to take another step. And what does that mean for a team that was so good with him as a rookie? If he plays better, where is this team going to go? But, a big key is just, again, him finding that consistency. And on the defensive side of the ball, I'll be honest, I'm worried about these young guys back there in the secondary. And that has nothing to do with my own draft evals of them. I don't think they overdrafted for any of them. I think they got Jordan Lewis rating around. I graded him. I think they got Chidobe Awuzie, maybe even a few picks behind where I could have seen him going. So, they took the guys where they were going to have to take them, and they did what I said they were going to do once again in this draft and getting those guys. But it's just you haven't seen them practice and you haven't seen them do a whole lot. You're going to throw them out there, and the pass rush probably isn't going to be all that improved. So I like the pieces they have on this defense. I think that at the very least by midseason or towards the end of the year, this will be a defense that's complementing the offense incredibly well because you're going to have hopefully health at the defensive end position, which means you have actual depth there this year, and you can actually rotate these guys in and get to the quarterback. You're going to have DeMonte Moore and David Irving coming off suspensions in Week 3 and Week 5 respectively, a 2- and 4-game suspension for those guys. So you're going to get pieces on this defense that are going to help, but those first couple weeks, can these guys in the secondary prove that this is the year that they're going to go contend? Because even if 2017 isn't your all-in championship window year, if it is 2018 because you get a year of experience at the most important position, and one of them being cornerback in the NFL right now, this still isn't a team that is ready to say, "Oh, we're just going to tank 2017 because we can't cover anybody."
Yeah,
they better be ready to line up and cover some guys, especially in this NFC East. We just talked about Eli Manning and Carson Wentz and Kirk Cousins. These are talented quarterbacks that can throw the football on you. So these guys are going to have to step up, and it's going to be really fascinating to see how they turn over a secondary in one season to a bunch of rookies that are going to be handed the keys.
Absolutely. If I had to make a prediction as far as record is concerned, I know 13-3 last year was phenomenal. I don't see that this year, which doesn't mean it's a bad thing. I was thinking more like 11-5, maybe 10-6, but that's kind of where I see this Dallas team. That's, again, not a bad thing. It's certainly good enough. It should be good enough to get into the playoffs. Whether it wins the division or not, we'll see. But that's where I think Dallas is right now.
Yeah, I think 11-5 sounds about right, and I think that's best said in that they don't care what the record is. Does it go up? Does it go down from 13-3? They just want to finally find some consistency in making the playoffs. Everybody will bring up that they went 12-4, 4-12, so it's good to go 13-3, 3-13. They have the pieces in place to obviously do much better than 3-13, unless it blows up in their faces again on the injury front. They have the pieces in place, I think, to do better than 13-3. The sweet spot will though probably be somewhere in the middle. And again, their hope is as long as that sweet spot gets them the division, gets them that consistency of making the playoffs once again under Dak Prescott, they can go make some noise.
Absolutely, man. Sean Martin, again, of WMSC. He hosts Upon Further Review every Friday, 1 to 4, and, of course, writes for Inside the Star. Sean, great to have you on. Any last thoughts? Any plugs you want to talk about with the show and the writing?
Oh, it's a pleasure to be here talking about the Cowboys. I always appreciate anyone that reads all my stuff and follows along on Twitter and all that. It's really appreciative, and I get good feedback and all that, which is awesome. You can find me on Twitter at SewerSportsNJ. Got my start over there doing some local high school stuff here around the sewer and all that. So SewerSportsNJ is another good place to find my work and to talk to me about football or whatever else. And InsideTheStar.com is where you can find my Cowboy stuff. We have our own show, the Star Podcast, you can check out every now and then as well. I definitely speak for our entire staff when I say that we're beyond excited to get the season going. Last season was so exciting to be covering this team, and this year expects to be even better. So we're excited to get writing and podcasting and doing all of those things through another regular season, and it's upon us, and we made it through a long off season, and I know you're ready to enjoy the NFL season as well. It's going to be a lot of fun.
Bring on some football already. Let's do it. Enough of this preseason stuff. My goodness. Enough with preseason.
Shorten the preseason.
Oh, please. Shorten it. Let's not cut it to 4 from 2. Let's not cut it to 2 from 4. Let's just cut it to 0. How's that?
That's fine with me. Let's play some football.
Please. Oh, man, Sean, it's been a pleasure to have you on. Thank you so much for coming on here onto the Sports Talk Nation. Folks, remember, folks, to follow us on Facebook. That's facebook.com/The Open Mic Program, and on Twitter at OpenMicNJ on Twitter, and subscribe right here on YouTube for the Sports Talk Nation. Talk to you next time.